I'll let her take that.
We actually met online.
Okay.
I was au pairing, funnily enough, and I know we're like, yeah. I looked at your website last night. I was like, I better, take the time to look at what you guys are doing. So, I was au pairing in LA, and I decided not to extend a second year. I had the opportunity to, but I decided not to. And part of the reason was because we met online, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were both on online dating websites. Him being on the ship and then me being in LA. I was moving back to a town of 4,000 people in Canada, and I was like, slim, no offense to that lovely town, slim pickings. So we met, and it was kind of just a whirlwind. I knew, the first time we met in person, I knew. So.
And where did you meet? Where did you set up the meeting?
My hometown.
Okay.
The day that I got back, I road tripped from Los Angeles up the Oregon coast to my hometown in British Columbia, and yeah, that's where we met. He drove down from Calgary, which is a few hours away.
Okay.
And then, so.
One
You
thing.
were coming in on the boat in Calgary. You just happened.
Well, I was on vacation, and
Okay.
actually, what was kind of funny is that when we started talking on the online site, she was in LA, and I was actually doing a road trip with my sister and her friend, and I was actually in LA. And like literally, because since we had started talking, we didn't mention a lot of specifics until we got to know each other better. So it was funny because the same day she was at the Hollywood sign, I was at the Hollywood sign,
No.
and I was staying at a hotel
Bizarre.
that was 5 blocks away from where she was living, but we didn't know that until we had both met in Canada. So it was like kind of those things like, wow, we were so close, but it just wasn't the time.
Gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, so
It was,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So exciting. So you are from Costa Rica.
yes, I was born in Costa Rica, and then when I was 7, I moved to Canada, and then when I was 18, I moved back to Costa Rica, and then 25, I moved back to Canada. So it's been kind of like
Back and forth.
half and half approximately.
Okay, but your parents, do they live in Canada now or Costa Rica?
Both of them live in Costa Rica now.
Okay.
I moved with my mom to Canada, and then she moved back to Costa Rica recently
Okay.
because she decided to be closer to family and all that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
But we have my sister-in-law and brother-in-law are in Calgary, so
Okay.
we get to see them, and
Yeah.
it's nice.
Wow. Okay, so you got married in April, you said before, and now so you've been married for 7, 8,
No, 2 months, like 2 months, like
Wait.
this April.
just April.
May,
Just April. Okay.
So it's like 2 months on the, just over 2 months on the 15th.
Okay, so tell us, what is it like being married now? Going from probably a long distance relationship too, right? You met and then you were long distance, but now you've been together for 2 months, living in a boat.
In close
Yeah,
quarters.
very, very close quarters. Smaller than a typical hotel room, about half the size of a typical hotel.
You get to know each other very well.
Yes.
It's actually been a huge blessing.
Yeah.
I think, for one thing, I'm not working full time, so I have all this time to dedicate to our relationship and the blog, and just getting to know what we want our marriage to look like now that we're actually together.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be together, but when we were apart, it was so hard. And so being in the tight, close quarters has actually been great, honestly. Yeah.
So-
it's been good.
What have you discovered now? What do you want your marriage to be? You said you're trying to figure this out. What do you want for your marriage? What ideas do you have right now, and what you want your marriage to become in
Yeah.
the future?
I would say kind of our theme word is unity. And there's quite a few things we would like to do with regard to empowering other couples, actually. That's kind of something that we've, from the beginning, been interested in, but we need to have our own foundation
Experience.
and our own experience before we can do that without being, without it, with it, in order for it to be real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is something that we've been pretty interested in, though. One day, maybe 15, maybe 20, I don't know how many years from now, but we'd like to mentor other couples.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like similar to our hearts as well. So it seems really neat that we're meeting you
Yeah.
right now in this moment. And I was thinking on the way here how technology, the world is so big right now, but technology can really bring us together. And how you just met you guys last week on Instagram, and here
Exactly.
you we're having fika together. Fika is a Swedish word. That first one you learn. It's actually meaning coffee, tea. So we're having fika together. But here we are in our town of Stockholm, and we can welcome you here. But what else? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so like about your blog, like where would you want to be like in 5 years, 10 years?
Well, right now we're still very young and we're still trying to find our voice and our direction and our style as to how we want to take it.
Yeah.
It would be a blessing if it's something that could give us some sort of income, some sort of ability to travel. If it could be something that I'm always one that's like when I want to go somewhere, I'm looking up, okay, what should I do? Where can we go? So if we can do that to help people, like have an easier time to travel, that would be great. If it's a way that we can express our voice, and like she said, we want to be able to counsel other families or to be a blessing in that area. So if our blog is not just a travel blog, I mean, right now it is because that's what we're doing, but as we kind of figure out our voice, we can include a little bit more of our spiritual side, since we're a Christian family, so that influences a lot in what we do. And like you said, technologies allows us to connect, and we want to kind of try to advocate for positive use of technology, because there's so many bad uses nowadays. It can be used for such harm and damage,
especially with children.
Yeah. So if we can kind of try to use that as a medium to bless other people as a positive way, then that would be like our little kind of addition.
Contribution.
Yeah.
That's what
Amazing.
Like expectations going into marriage, what is the same or kind of exceeded your expectations, and what was some surprises or challenges in that?
You want to go first?
No, you go ahead. I'll think about it.
Well, the thing is with my dad, my dad is a pastor in Costa Rica, and he's always, like, ever since I turned 18 and I moved back to Costa Rica, he spent a lot of time kind of guiding me, molding me, teaching me a lot of things, how a marriage should be, what to expect, and a lot of different things. So he's been a big help and a big influence, as well as my mom in my life, to kind of get me prepared as to what to expect. I guess a lot of things that we went from being like a long distance relationship to being together every day. You find out a lot of things really quickly about the other person, which is a big blessing, but it also means you have to have a period of adjustment. And what we're reading books like we saw on your website, we read an article, mentioned Gary Chapman. We're reading one of his books right now, things like What I Wish I Knew Before We Got Married. And the thing is, even though we are married, it's been so helpful for us. And it's true that a lot of people have a certain perspective, like it's going to be a fairy tale, like it's going to be this, and it is. And I love her more now than I did when I met her. And it's been a big blessing, and I wouldn't imagine it any other way. But we were very aware that it's not going to be a fairy tale, and that there's things that you have to go through, and stages and adapting. So
what have been some of the differences, or how about, have you had a first fight yet, or just a argument that you can think of?
Well, we have a bit of a rule against talking about our disagreements publicly. We've figured that when we disagree, we should resolve it between ourselves and God. So
that's really great.
We feel that that's important. That's something that Luis's dad and stepmom have modeled to us as a Christian couple. That if you keep it between yourselves, then it eliminates gossip. It eliminates the power that words can have in kind of going out beyond us as a couple. So, I mean, there's certainly, of course, there have been disagreements, but we managed to resolve things pretty quickly. So
it's just about talking about it. I guess there's times, like sometimes you get upset and you just need. It's all about learning to read the other person. Like sometimes I get upset, let's say, and I need some time to cool off, and then we can talk about it. Sometimes she, depending on what happens, sometimes we need to talk about it right away. But that's one of the things we've been learning, and it's helped us. It's just to talk about things and work things out, not to use kind of a psychological term, not to stonewall each other, and to actually talk about things. So we have had our disagreements, because we're two different people and we're unique. So we just have to, in the end, after a couple of years, like you see, like my dad or the couples that are really old, they kind of mold into one
Yeah.
person in a way.
And that's coming back to the word you said on unity.
Yes.
And that's something that you want to define your marriage. So let's come back to that word. And how can two people that are so different and from different cultures, how are you going to become united as a couple and in your vision for life? And what are some steps that you are taking to define that word for yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I think a big part is the people that we surround ourselves with. Do they push us together or pull us apart? So finding supportive community for us, that often means people within our religion, because
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common among most religions. And like Louise said, listening, communicating. I've been just very blessed that he's very good at communicating, and he breaks the stereotype of
Yeah.
many men being poor communicators. And I think that if we can remain open to listening to each other's visions and dreams without putting the kibosh on, if he shares a dream or vision with me, to listen and encourage him in that and support him in that, and ideally for that to become my vision and dream too. And if we're both doing that, then I think it's going to slowly bring us together over the years.
Well, one thing that we notice and that we've talked about is that it's very important before you make the decision to get married to talk about the hard things. Like, for example, we talked about, like, from the very beginning, we started talking about our beliefs, what our vision is for our beliefs and how we want to raise our children, how many we want, all those little things that most couples end up arguing because they don't find out till after they're married. We figured all that stuff out before. So talking about that early on, even though sometimes it was hard conversations because it's not easy to talk about that serious stuff, but I think that talking about all that has made things a lot easier. That once we got married, if we hadn't talked about that, we had to deal with all that. And then in addition to that, we have to deal with all the things that we weren't preparing. So now, since we dealt with all of that, we can focus on the little things that come up and then to just mold to each other and to be understanding and all that. So I find that the preparation before marriage is very important, and to actually seriously look at it, what you guys want.
And I think the distance actually aided us hugely, because we had to talk. We had no other means of communicating. And so we would do quizzes, we would read books together, all of that really push things forward more quickly than if we would have been together in person, I think.
Yeah. You guys gave yourself a great head start for your marriage, it sounds like. What, did you do counseling as well together? Were you able to do some of that?
We weren't able to, because he was gone quite a bit. The majority of our engagement, he was away working.
Yeah.
It's something that we talked about being open to, though, if issues did come up. I asked quite early on, if something were to happen that we needed outside help, would you be open to that? And he immediately said yes, of course. So it's something that I think our entire marriage will remain open to. I think that there are a lot of times that having an outside mediator can be useful.
What would be the 3 things that you would advise a couple looking for a partner and then going into to marriage? Could even be transitioning into marriage.
3 things. I would say, number 1, that old adage of you're marrying the family is true. You're marrying the family, and old habits die hard. So if you look at that person's father, if they're a man, or mother if they're a woman, unless, like you just talked about, being aware of the habits, the behaviors that caused harm, without being aware of those, they'll probably be repeated. So that's a big one, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
And well, do you have one?
Well, kind of adding to that one is, like, it's good to have someone that you trust. Like, for example, in my case is my father and my stepmom. They've been marriage counselors as well as pastors, and it's like they counsel a lot of marriages, so they have a lot of experience. in that. And when they met her and they gave me the blessing, that made me feel a lot more at peace, because there's been several times in the past that, let's say I was dating someone, I would say, what do you think? They'd be like, no. They would tell me like right away, no. And not because they didn't like the person, it's because they pray a lot for us and they do all that. So it's good to have an outside influence that is really looking out for your well-being and impartial, and then you will being able and willing to listen to them if they tell you something that you don't necessarily agree with, because they might be able to see it, and if you're completely in love, you won't be able to see it until it's too late.
Yeah, the blinders, the love blinders. Yeah, that's a good
So
one.
true. That's good. Good advice.
So one more, let's see.
I know we're putting you on the spot here. You guys are doing awesome.
It really makes you think, so this is actually good.
Yeah, it is. It's good. It'll bring up some good conversations later.
Yeah.
Number 3.
Transitioning into marriage, like, 'cause I don't know if you would agree the same, like what I said before, just to make sure you talk about everything, to really talk about all the hard things, like how many kids you want, where you want to live, what you see the direction of your careers going. Like, one thing we talked about is she going to be the only one that stays home, or there will be times where I'll have to stay home with the kids, and how many kids you want, all that kind of things. All those types of questions I think are good to sort out before you get married.
And I think one that isn't as typical, even if you look at like lists of things to go through, is who's going to stay at home, who's going to raise the kids. Are you going to live in a place where childcare is government subsidized? What is that going to look like? Are you okay with having a nanny raise your child? All of that. And I guess part of the reason I think that's important is because I au paired, as you did, and saw the family dynamics and what that looked like, and the hard choices that a family with 2 working parents had to make. So I think that in certain cultures, particularly I think the U.S. would be fair to say, the woman takes over the vast majority of the child care and housework, and so we discussed a lot, is that what we want?
Even in the Latino culture, that's very dominant.
Yeah.
So you guys get to ask the people watching this a question.
Okay.
What is it that you want to ask?
Anything jump out at you? It has to be marriage related, or anything. Anything.
And travel related, because we know that's your passion as well.
Where would you recommend, can I go with this? Where would you recommend we settle down? Because right now we are trying to choose a country or a state, or where in the world we want to end up a few years from now. So what would your recommendation be? Bearing in mind the economy, the job opportunities, particularly IT jobs.
Warmer weather too.
And warm weather.